Joining us now is Congressman Adam Smith of Washington. He is the top-ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee. Congressman Smith, first, I want to get your reaction to last night's security breach at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Yeah, no, it's deeply concerning, disturbing. I'm glad that everyone's safe. But yeah, we need to do an investigation to figure out how this happened and how it can be better prevented in the future. But it's also just a reminder of very, very dangerous times we're living in. Shootings like this, sadly, are all too common across the country in a wide range of settings.
Congressman, let's turn to Pete Hegseth coming to Capitol Hill. Lots of questions about the war in terms of the conduct, the strategy, more importantly, perhaps maybe some of the firings and removals from the top military brass that Pete Hegseth has been carrying out over the last, I guess, 54 days or so since the war began. Just give me a sense of what it is that you want to hear from Pete Hegseth about the change in leadership at the military.
Well, the number one biggest issue is what's going on in Iran. We appear badly stuck. The costs are going up, and we don't seem to be able to accomplish our objectives. So what's the goal? What's the plan? We're just going to continue the blockade forever as the global economy and our economy suffers? Do they actually have a plan for ending this war? Because right now it does not appear that they do, and what's going to be the impact on the military? So obviously the Iran war is number one. It appears to be a massive disaster right now, so we want to know what their plan is for getting out of the situation they're in right now. Second thing is the budget. I mean, they're preparing to ask for, all told, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.6 trillion, which would be an over 50% increase in the defense budget. How is that possibly sustainable with our fiscal picture, with our debt and our other needs and priorities? And then, yes, the chaos within the Pentagon. I don't know what the numbers are, but going back to his first month in office as Secretary of Defense, he's fired a record number of senior level leaders, most of the time without any explanation, and people who widely are respected, people who seem to be doing a very good job. That's causing chaos and disruption, certainly in the middle of a war, but just to run the Department of Defense in general, why the chaos and the massive turnover and the dismissing of highly capable officers?
Congressman, you mentioned this budget request from the Pentagon for $1.5, $1.6 trillion, whatever it is. This comes as we are learning via NBC News that U.S. bases and military equipment have sustained a lot more damage than had previously been known or at least acknowledged publicly by the Pentagon. So given that there is more damage, that we do want to make sure that our servicemen and women abroad are safe and that they have the equipment and fortifications that they need. How do you ensure that whatever money gets spent by this administration to make those repairs or otherwise is actually used to make those repairs, right, to ensure that people are, that, you know, American blood and treasure are kept safe, as opposed to being used for more foreign adventurism?
Yeah, there's a lot to that. So I perhaps should have led with the fact that one of the big questions is what has this war cost us? One underreported part of this is we've lost a lot of equipment that has been destroyed. What's the cost of that? We lost 2 C-130s, over $100 million a pop, in the rescue of our downed airmen. So what has it cost and where are we at? Certainly is going to be a big part of it. Just to explain the budget, they're asking for $1.15 trillion in the standard budget request, but then they're asking for another $350 billion in a reconciliation package, and there is a supplemental expected anywhere between 100 and 200 billion. So that's where you get to that very high number. But then there's the second issue. How do we know if you're going to spend this money effectively? The Pentagon still hasn't passed an audit. Do we know where the money is going? Is this making us safer? But the biggest issue to my mind is that the Pentagon and the Trump White House have decided that the military is just going to be their go-to easy button for every problem in the world. We're going to be starting wars and blowing stuff up and bombing countries every time we get the chance. That, I think, is incredibly dangerous. It's not a way to meet our national security objectives, and it ramps up the costs and ramps up the danger. Pete Hegseth came into office saying that he was a realist. There is absolutely nothing realistic about what he is trying to accomplish with our military right now, from the budget to the war in the Middle East. So how's that going to square? How are we going to meet our national security needs when it seems to be absolutely insatiable with the Trump White House in terms of using our military everywhere they possibly can? Oh, by the way, while they're cutting the State Department, cutting development aid, undermining all of the soft power tools that can make the military less needed.
Congressman, it is pretty amazing that the defense secretary has not testified to Congress since this war has begun. So this hearing is a big opportunity to shed some more light on what is actually happening with this war. What is the most important question that you want Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to answer when he testifies?
What are our objectives? What does success look like? Because they've been doing a bait and switch game on us from the very start of this war. They keep saying we are ahead of schedule. We're meeting all of our objectives. And all they really mean by that is we're blowing a lot of stuff up. You know, we're destroying a lot of missiles, a lot of missile silos, a lot of Navy ships. But how does that move towards a strategic success? Because the goal of this war should not be just to blow stuff up. The goal of this war is to stop Iran's nuclear program, maybe stop their ballistic missile program, stop their support for terrorism, and fundamentally change how the regime behaves in the region. There's no evidence whatsoever that the stuff that we're blowing up leads us to that. And in the middle of it, we now have the Strait of Hormuz as a problem that we didn't have when this war started. So if you sort of look at the strategic outcome, we're going backwards, not forwards. Iran nuclear program, just as strong as it was when this war started. They're still building ballistic missiles and drones. They're still supporting terrorists. Now they got the Strait of Hormuz in a chokehold. So number one biggest question is, what's your objective? Which of these goals do you want to achieve, and how do you plan to achieve them? Because it's very clear that hitting a whole bunch of targets, however effectively we do it, is not achieving any sort of meaningful objective.
Congressman, I want to get your thoughts on the intersection of politics and how this war is being conducted. You look at President Trump's polling. He's facing dismal approval numbers. CNBC polling shows only 40% of Americans approve of his overall performance. How does his unpopularity impact his decision-making over this war? You know, there was some concern that he perhaps launched this war to distract from the Epstein files. Now that the war is not going very well, he may find something else to try to come up with.
Yeah, I'd like to know what that 40% think is going well, by the way. I'm always puzzled by that number. But look, and I want to dissuade people of this notion that, oh, Trump did this to distract from that. Trump doesn't do things to distract. He does things because he wants to exercise power. He wants to accumulate as much power as possible by weakening every possible check on it, whether it's the media, Congress, law firms, whoever it is. He wants to consolidate power and then use it. And he uses it frequently like a petulant child. I mean, using the Justice Department to go after his political enemies, using the FCC to try to strike down media companies that he doesn't like. And yes, he likes to use the military, whether it's, blowing up boats down in the Caribbean and the Pacific, dropping bombs in Yemen. We all forget about the 3-month war in Yemen, or going into Iran. So I think Trump's strategy is basically he is going to use force, violence, and power to bend the world to his will. And that's incredibly alarming. It creates the level of disruption and violence and economic upheaval that we've seen globally. So I think it's a mistake to think that he's going to look at his polling numbers and he's going to go to distract us. It's a lot worse than that. Okay, he's doing this because it's his vision of his executive power, which is devastating domestically. My gosh, the scope of the Middle East war, I was just looking at a graphic about where gas shortages are showing up and all the countries in the world that now have fuel restrictions, as if we're in World War II. And that number is in the dozens, okay? This impact, and he did it on a whim. He did it because, oh, let's try a decapitation strike. Okay, it didn't really work. Let's just keep bombing for a while. All right. So don't think that he's got some sort of strategy here and he's trying to distract from one thing or another. He's just exercising power in a very irresponsible and costly way.
Congressman Adam Smith, thank you for that explanation of the 6D chess that we are witnessing at the moment. Really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance.
Next up, we will speak with a former Secret Service official about the agency's preparedness after not